I'm happy, the president is taking the initiative to look at the tax laws in Nigeria and the need to bring reforms. He has considered the task force to look at to champion tax reforms in Nigeria. So the issue of taxes high tax on remittances is also part of what this committee should look at in collaboration with the CBN. And that's the concern of NIDCON, which is why Abike Dabiri is talking about it, agency is in charge of the welfare of Nigerians in diaspora. So the best way to encourage these people to pay more is when the taxes are not so high, when you encourage them to pay, and then you justify the payment by also utilizing this money effectively. And so it's now expected of the CBN to ensure that the high tax on remittances should be looked into quickly, so that these people will be encouraged to pay the more and to also perform their obligation as Nigerian citizens.
Yes, some of those in diaspora have also deployed ways by which they send money. There was even a time people were sending money via post as if it's in mail. You send it in hard currency, and those to whom they sent will go over to the parallel markets, or what they call the black markets, to have them change because of the high charges. And like Idausa has rightly said, it's also about the charges that accrue on people who make transactions in the banking system. You make deposits, for instance. Before, we used to think that it's only when you make a withdrawal that you are charged. But this time around, even when money is deposited into your account, you are charged for it. So the high cost of transactions in the banking system is really something that should be looked at holistically, and not just about encouraging diaspora remittance. It is very good that they want to encourage that, but I think the CBN governor should look deeper into that, because really it's a disincentive. Sometimes it's just because you have no option, but because you need to keep money in the bank and you need to transact within the bank. Because when you look at the charges, so many charges, it's just really a disincentive. When you operate a savings account before, there are certain interests that accrue to it, but this time around, you operate a savings account, and it's even more expensive than running a current account. These are things that should be addressed within the banking system.
All right, the next story is still about the CBN. CBN is playing its role now as a regulatory body. It says the Central Bank of Nigeria has reassured the public that every banknote it remains legal tender and should not be refused by anyone. In a few weeks, there's been this confusion about, the issue about the new notes and the old notes. You remember that a few months ago that new notes were released, and therefore there was this deadline given, which is December, for the transition between the old and the new notes. So there was this confusion between Nigeria, which one should be given priority. And so the CBN has to come into the equation to douse the tension that every note in Nigeria, whether old or new, is still legal tender. And, because the apprehension came because the deadline is getting nearer. The deadline is December, which was what the court ruled was given initially. And so, but CBN had to come in to tell Nigerians that, okay, since it's legal tender, it's a national note, it remains legal tender. There's no confusion whether old or new, until we have a new directive talking about what to be done, and if respect to the court rule, if the deadline is going to be extended or not, we don't know. But as to speak now, whether the old note or the old new note, it still remains legal tender and should be used in circulation.
I think Nigerians, we need to always have to listen and hear things. People always get panicked over nothing. And I don't know why we had to hearing somehow. Mr. President, when he came in at his inaugural speech on May 29, irrespective of what, because the ruling of the bank was to keep a status quo. Because the governor took the bank, these people to court and said, look, you can't change notes like this. The president says, in line with best global practice, the new and the old note will circulate ad infinitum. He was very clear about it. And that's what is done everywhere. The queen is dead. You still see the queen head on the currency. They have not thrown them away. This thing has to strategically leave the circulation. As they come into the CBN, then of course, as we have capacity to print more notes, we can use it, because this is also costing the nation hard-earned taxpayer money to print new notes. So if the notes are still usable, so why do we need to throw them away? The real issue, which is what CBN really need to look into, is to look at the reason why people carry cash. And once we are able to look at that, then of course the confidence in people doing a lot of stuff become very easy. Nigerians are weary of carrying even debit card now because of this one chance people, whether it's in Lagos or in Abuja. They take your card, they force you to take the PIN and wipe up your account. They take your telephone, they manipulate your details, they take away your money. Now, these are all the reasons why people don't want to actually go and put money in the bank. And some for them is safer in their house. And then, of course, there's other religious reasons. People who don't want to save money in the commercial bank because they felt that saving money in the commercial bank, it could be invested in area where their religion does not allow or permit. So all these are the real reason why people have to hold on to cash. And because we're a cash-driven economy, we cannot but look at creative ways to ensure that we move cash away from the economy. But this also will require that those who are doing their things, they should do it very well. We visited Rainbow, which is the digital platform that hosts the all payments into government in Rwanda last week. And one of the things that we asked was, how many times has this server been hacked? And they say no attempt at all. And it shows you that they are protected. But you can imagine that how much hacking we do on a daily basis on our infrastructure because of the clever nature of some of our young people. So this is what we really need to work at and see how we can ensure that cash-less society really flourish, because the greatest incentive or motivation for crime is cash. And if it's not there, let people begin to do paperless money, and then of course we can do transaction on e-wallet and the rest of it. A whole lot of things will be sanitized.
The former CBN governor, was perceived to be in a hurry, to have decided to change the note. He gave a time frame within 2 or 3 months, gave a deadline that, okay, Nigeria must shift from the old to the new note. And then one wonder, what would be the reason for that kind of sudden change, when it wasn't that it was a priority to fix the economy. I remember the argument at that time was to tackle the issue of terrorism, the issue of kidnapping and things like that. But it was so amazing to have learned that an important stakeholder like the Ministry of Finance was not being carried along. And here we are now, it's looking like a policy somersault where you have new notes being issued, and then another regime came into power and said, hey, let these two go in the new hold and the new, should be in circulation together. What lessons should we learn when it comes to the issue of policy somersault?
Well, I have had occasion also to talk to some people in CBN. I think the real issue was not a somersault of policy of sort. It was the right thing to have been done at that time, given the fact that if you look at the volume of money that was in circulation, compared to the one that CBN could cite, the difference was huge. And of course, being the principal agent that monitored the circulation of money, it should be able to have oversight over where currencies are in the circulation. So this was the problem. And it was assumed that a lot of people were actually stockpiling this money, either for terrorist purpose, or they were also stockpiling it for election purposes. And therefore, the liquidity of the bank become low, and then of course you cannot lend. So these were the real issues. So the policy was not a problem. Even the timing was not a problem. What was a problem was the fact that the implementation was what went wrong. Yeah. If CBN knew that all that their target were politicians, so to speak, All that they would have just done was to discourage all ask bank to hold on to high denomination notes. It was as simple as that. You have $500, you don't see it in the street. You have $5,000 notes, you don't see it in the street. All you see in the street, the higher denomination of dollar you see in the street is $100. Then, of course, $5, $1, $2. Those are the things you see on the street. So that's what CBN needed to do. All they needed to do was to ensure that you have enough of 50 naira notes, 20 naira notes, 100 naira notes on your ATM machine. So if you want people to take a note, you go and take 5,000, you do your issue. But the problem was the fact that you were still circulating the high denomination notes, and of course they were not available. Some people are taking them and they have stocked it. Now you see, if somebody wants to carry 1,020,000 naira note, you know how many Ghana must go will carry. So that would have been a disincentive, and then you would not have issues. But you find that these people who were the perpetrator of this crime had to lash on the cries of the very poor, who probably had 3,000 naira in their account and they want to go and take 1,000 to buy medication and they don't have. So this was where the problems are. And then, of course, on the other part, you see the POS people were feasting on them. You want to withdraw 1,000, they ask you to pay 100 naira. So which was really exorbitant. These were the real issues. And I think that's what CBN really didn't do well. But in terms of the policy, I think it was the right thing to do to ensure that the entire money that was in circulation, CBN can have oversight on it and see where these monies are, how the money are moving, whose hand these monies are. Then you will actually be able to track those who are funding illicit activities or criminal activities or endeavor within society. But this is where the challenge is. So if I have 10 billion naira in my house and I call a group of people that I'm doling money, nobody can track me. But if I'm moving it from the bank, somebody know that I have come to the bank to move this volume of money. Then, of course, even the security agencies can begin to look at you, how you are going to spend this money, where you are going to spend it. So if you have 3 trillion naira printed in circulation, and what CBN can see is just 1.6 trillion, then you wonder, where is the other money? Whose hand are they? So these were the real motivation for that decision that was taken by the old CBN. But because of the hardship it brought, that's why we are looking at these measures and palliative. But in the longer run, I think Nigeria really need to discourage the use of hard cash in the hand of people, because it's a great incentive for criminal enterprise.
I agree that cash going around like that, particularly high currencies, is an incentive for criminal activities, particularly when we're talking about in a time where kidnappings have risen to a very great level. So payment for a ransom is done usually in cash. But with the implementation, even after the deadline, which brought a lot of hardship to people, was extended by the court, and then we saw from after the election, there's been the use of both the old and new notes. I do not think that the CBN has done enough in actually correcting some of the wrongs or the wrongful implementation of the Naira redesign, because the notice that was given initially was very short. The time at which people had to change the old note and the new note was short, and it wasn't even available. You get to the bank, you want to exchange your old note for new note, it is not available. So there were a lot of malpractices, sharp practices going on at that particular time, and it was also not available, which created room for the POS people and a lot of racketeering going on with the Naira. So we would have expected, or Nigerians expected, that going forward after the time, because of the hardship that people suffered, and they saw how terrible it was, they would have made it possible that people would have easy access to the new Naira note. I, for one, expected that by now, the new Naira note would have gone round, naturally circulating, and you have less of the old Naira note than the new Naira note. But we still don't have that situation, and we're approaching December. Now, the issue of whether or not the deadline will be exchanged is what makes people apprehensive and make them scared, because it is still fresh in the minds of a lot of Nigerians, the pains that they went through during that period. So I do not actually blame Nigerians for being apprehensive and trying to ensure that they For some of them now, they may even be doing a lot of stockpiling. If they have new Naira notes, they'll be keeping them ahead of that time. So the CBN needs to do a lot more besides reassuring people verbally by coming out to say, oh, don't worry. We should see more of the new Naira notes in circulation. We do not want to get to December and we're told a different story. People begin to go through that harrowing experience again. So more, I think that the lessons that we should have learned is how best to do things in line with global best practices. All around the world, it is not already done for the new notes to come into circulation and the phasing of the old notes. So we should copy that when we copy things.
The issue with global best practices, we are very peculiar and unique people. And I think Nigerians must understand that we are very active, we are very enterprising, and whether positive or negative. And you hardly see some of all these things happen elsewhere, because where people make laws and you have a culture where people are trained, properly trained to play by the rule, you don't have some of all these things happen. And that's why those people can make a law and they know that once the law is written and everybody reads it, and they know that it's not good to break a law. But for us as a people, the level of lawlessness in our environment is what we should actually be worried about. That some of the things that we see here is not about CBN really making the whole blunder. Don't forget that during the raid, EFCC had to raid some bank, DSS went to some bank, and you see some bank managers who were actually doing this stripping, not CBN. This is Nigeria becoming wicked to Nigerians. This is the situation where you find everywhere. It's not just about CBN. We are opportunistic people. We're always looking for that opportunity, window to exploit. Just imagine today now, they say, oh, NNPC is waiting to make a decision on what to do with price of petrol. Go and see Q. Because we are just opportunistic. And it is not just about CBN alone. This is about almost all Nigerians. And this is the kind of attitude that is not good for public policies. Other claims, when people make law, they just expect that citizens will obey. In Nigeria, when you make law, you will go and employ human being to go and enforce the law. Sometimes they say, people are driving against traffic and they say it's because of bad leadership. Because we have that excuse to give. And we are not responsible, we are not accountable. And I think that is what we really need to drive into our DNA as a people. To, number one, learn responsibility and then learn accountability, so that we don't always blame people for our misfortune. Then we must be able to take responsibility for things we don't do well. The POS man who was doing that, nobody said he should do that. He just took advantage. And we like taking advantage. If you drive a bus to a bus stop today and you see about 20 people are waiting, you see opportunity, you increase the fare. They don't do it elsewhere, except in this our country alone. And this is the attitude that is not good to life. This is what is bringing untold hardship to us as a people. So CBN is even left at the will of the caprices of the people. Even in terms of managing the forest now, that's something that's happening. You know somebody somewhere, you take the money from the back door and you keep it away from the system, and then of course everybody suffer just for your own personal benefit. And I think that as a people, we need to deliberately think about value on how what we do impact on the life of other people and how it brings succor to them also.
I think the CBN can also do a lot more because they are the regulatory body. The CBN is the apex bank.
How many CBN have that can man the 260 million people in Nigeria? No. Or they will have somebody in every bank?
CBN has the obligation to regulate the activities of the banks. There are places for sanctions where you find the bank to have flouted the rules. What have they done to those banks that were found to have been holding cash at that time and giving to some?
If you remember, even during the MFLA's tenure, where of course the CBN made the rule and said every bank should maintain a deposit of 60%. And CBN started to fine banks for breaking the rule. All the blackmailed were all there in the streets. This is who we are as a people. We're only looking for somebody to blame. CBN cannot be in every bank to see what is happening there. CBN can only make a rule. It is the responsibility of the Nigerians who are bankers to keep the rules and not waiting for somebody to hold a stick to whip them or to fine them. This is the real issue. Laws are made for the good of the citizens. We are not looking for somebody to be punished. If we take a punitive approach to our legal system, we will not get out. This is the problem. That, look, we are building prison because we want to punish people. That is not the essence. The real essence of building prison is to ensure that people are corrected, so that they don't go that deviant behavior. Those misdemeanors are accounted for. We are always emphasizing punishment, punishment, punishment. Now, why should a responsible person be waiting until he's punished before he do what is right? So for me, is that we have to deliberately teach ourselves to do the right, even when nobody is watching us.
But we have gotten to the point where people do not do what is expected of them. They do what is inspected.
Only in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Get beyond that level. We don't need to be inspected. We have to do and take responsibility for our actions. That this is us, this is our nation. We have a responsibility to salvage it, and we are not waiting for any human being to come and whip us into action until people. That is eye service, and that is why we are not making progress.
All right. This situation vices what is obtainable,
This is reality.
The reality on ground, and I hope
The bad culture on ground.
which is the essence of having this kind of conversation, to enlighten people and to put attention to these things that has to be corrected. But I hope this time around that the CBN will do more in playing its regulatory role, because the CBN has to do that supervisory role, whether you like it or not. In a country like Nigeria, it is needed. All right, let's move to the energy sector, where the Nigerian government is shifting its focus to alternative power sources, such as small hydro dams, solar energy, wind power, to improve electricity supply in Nigeria. This has been the clamor over the years for us to diversify our electricity in Nigeria, not to over-rely on, hydro, which has been the mainstay when it comes to power sector in Nigeria. There's a need to open up that sector to have alternatives. And now the federal government is looking in that direction. And I hope it's not that the usual thing in Nigeria where you talk and then no action follows. I want to see, in particular, what will be done to explore the alternatives that you have when it comes to solar energy, not just for a particular area, but to commercialize it with the right regulatory framework to make it available for an average Nigerian to be able to consume it, because the challenge now is the over-reliance on the national grid, which we every day collapse every day, and then we're not doing the way, the efficiency in that sector is missing, is bereft of efficiency when you look at our power sector. So this time around, I think it's necessary for the federal government to consider these alternatives. Do you think this is the miracle we've been waiting for?
I don't see it as a miracle. In 2009, I was in the UAE, and we're having a meeting and a conversation, and we're talking about the solar energy. That same year, the United Arab Emirates signed a contract to build a solar energy. They didn't have need for power because their normal conventional source of energy was working, but they were only looking into the future. So the same day, unfortunately, the same company, Siemens, also signed a contract with Nigeria. And I told them in the UAE then that our own is on the pipeline. It will never come out. A year after, UAE delivered. We were doing 11,000 kilowatts we were supposed to do solar power. UAE were doing ×2. The value of UAE was lesser than our own value. They have since delivered their own. Our own is still on the pipeline. This is the point I'm making here. You see, we like to blame. We like blame so well as a country. A whole lot is not right with us as a people. This is the real issue. Nigerians are the enemies of Nigeria. Some people profit from these lacunas. And because it paid them so that we can continue to repair and maintain the things that they know that will not work, as long as they continue to put money in their pocket, that's the best policy. This is where we have found ourselves, where people like to cut corner. You've been reading in the news that some people have been making call and contact to reach the president because there are some certain section of actions that government needs to take, and somebody is making call every day. This is our problem. This is our nightmare. Solar is not anything big to do. NASENI, the federal government agency for science and infrastructure development, they have perfected technology for building even local solar technology. All we need is to deploy. If you go through the city of Morocco, Casablanca, you see all the roads, they are powered by solar. Houses are powered by solar. What is the difficulty? They put the element there, they put this thing there. Every house has solar. When it comes to Nigeria, it becomes an white elephant project. And this is because there's something in our DNA. And I have said to people before that we need to go and look at our DNA and check the blood inside it. Because it's so frustrating. There's things that are not rocket science, things that are so very simple to do, we cannot achieve it. And it's not that the resource is not there. Just for the simple fact that somebody feels that he is the only person who's entitled, and he must believe because the student must be in Japan, must be in America, while other people suffer at home. This is the challenge, and this is what is affecting every sector. Whether it's power, whether it's electricity, whether it is energy, whether it's gas, the same thing we need to deal with. We just call it mildly corruption. It's the wickedness of an average Nigerian.
Well, I don't know what lab we would need to go to where they can find the the corruption gene, where they can find the corruption gene, and if some form of extraction can be done to remove it. But I think that the system enables it, and the system is also controlled by people who are Nigerians. So it's a dilemma, actually, that sometimes when you think about it and you're thinking about the way out of it, you run short of ideas, because while you're thinking of how to improve the system, there are those who will fight in the system. And then you like you said sometime, what the president said, corruption seemed to be fighting back. It seemed like those in the armies of the corrupt are so much that the pushback against every attempt to fight it is so much, it becomes almost impossible to fight it. Talking now about the power sector, the government seems to be paying lip service into shifting away from the national grid and the hydro-powered electricity that we have. Because if private sectors, individuals can at small levels do this and they are successful, imagine if government, all the money they've been pumping into the power sector, maintaining the national grid, and it's collapsing, often so epileptic, how far we would have gone. And it's just so painful because we have a lot of these resources naturally. Talk about wind energy. It's naturally available at a very high level here. Something that can be cheaply done, but the will to do it, because some persons would not benefit if power becomes easily accessible by Nigerians. For those who major in the sales of generators, what will happen to their business?
I agree with you, but it's also good to balance this discussion. You know, we seem to be very critical about Nigeria, our DNA, what we believe, our system. But the truth is, in every society, you always have the good, the bad, and the ugly. Whether in UK, Germany, wherever, you always speak. You always have the bad ones, you always have the good ones. So you have Nigerians that are good, even in their DNA, still part of, to do what is right. But I think largely what we need to do is a systemic problem, which has to be fixed. And then perhaps the leadership problem contributes to it. So I strongly believe, let's give our leadership a benefit of doubt this time around. That's why we're analyzing this kind of story. If they're saying they actually want to explore those alternatives, let's give them a benefit. Let's believe in our government. Let's even believe in ourselves.
Yeah, if we that is the question. Yeah. It's not about systems. You see, when you talk about systems, the real issue here is people. It's not systems. Because it is people that run systems. When Nelson Mandela came out of prison in 1994, came to Nigeria to take our constitution, the one we say is not good, took it wholesale, put it in South Africa, and it was working magic. And the man made a comment that was so happy that Nigeria, we actually fought heavily to set South Africa free. But unfortunately, we have disappointed Africa and the rest of the black men in the whole world by the way we live. Now, the issue here is not just about leadership. It's not about leadership. Because as long as we are blaming issues on leadership, we fail to realize that leaders are taken from the midst of their people. How come 774 local government chairmen are behaving the same way? All the members of National Assembly behaving the same way, irrespective of parties? It doesn't matter who comes to power. Every president we have had, every governor that we have had, everybody is behaving the same way, and you are talking about leadership? This is people, and that our DNA needs purging if we must get it right someday.